All right, we're welcoming Dr. David Hinds this evening, who is a business coach, educator, and author. His topic is how to build a lean culture on the front lines. Let me see. He's author of the book entitled The Essence of Lean, A Superior System of Management. He's a passionate believer in the value of lean thinking and provides management training and advisory services for organizations who wish to build a more resilient culture through the development of lean organizational practices. Throughout his career, he was the owner of a building supply distributor and held senior management positions in consulting, biotechnology, and transportation. After earning his PhD, David joined the faculty of the Huizenga Business School, where he developed and taught courses in lean entrepreneurship, service operations management, data-driven decision-making, and information systems. All right, David, welcome. We are glad to have you this evening. As I mentioned previously, I'm very excited to hear your presentation, and I'm going to give the floor over to you. Let me enable screen sharing. Let's see. Stop mine. All right, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thank you so much. And again, thank you to your section and to ASQ. I love these sessions. It's a great opportunity to interact with some really terrific, smart people. So I'm really looking forward to this. And as I said before, hopefully learning more from you all than you maybe learn from me. But so let me go ahead and share the screen and get my slides up here. There they are. And let me. Okay. So this is about how to build a lean culture on the front lines. And so what I want to do is I'll start out giving a little bit of background, how I got to this point and what I'm talking about tonight. And then I really want to go through 3 different tools or techniques, whatever you want to call them, that I think are somewhat innovative. At least these are some tools and methods that I've developed in trying to teach lean as a way of managing. So I really primarily teach managers. That's what I did in the Huizenga Business School. That's what I'm doing now as a individual and doing webinars and training in the field. So the 3 techniques: process breakdown, lean circles, and trust assessment. But as I said before, I really want this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to jump in with a question at any time that pops into your mind. I'll manage the time, and after each section, I will stop and see if there's questions. We can have a little discussion on each one. And I thought these are going to be the 3 things that would be of interest, but depending on where you want to go, I could certainly talk more about some of the softer side of this and how this fits into what we talked about in the breakout session of the issues of managers and the extent to which they either respect or don't respect their employees. And I know a lot of times that becomes a problem for the quality improvement people trying to get something done. So real briefly, this was my primary practical experience with what I came to realize was lean techniques, lean management. Trend Distributors was a wholesale distributor of cabinet and furniture hardware. My wife and I bought the assets of a defunct company in 1988 in Hallandale, Florida. This is where we started. We had the beginnings of a catalog already, and over the years, expanded to 2 other locations. 10 years later, we're bought by the Worth Group of Germany. And this is what our sales looked like. It was just a tremendous, very successful, difficult at first, but we really learned the hard way how to run a business and how to grow it. This is me back then, and my wife Brenda, who's my full partner in this. I was basically president, she was vice president. And of course, the only way this happened, we got this kind of success, was through our team. We started with about 5 people. We ended up with about 60 by the time we sold the company. And the two areas that really influenced me, that kind of led to me understanding later on that, hey, I was actually performing a lean management, a way of managing. Total quality management, which was just starting to really kick in the distribution world. We had some of our manufacturers doing Kaizen events, which I started hearing about. And the other influence was transformational leadership based on the work of Bennis. So that's kind of where it started. Again, this was 80s to the end of the 90s. And just wanted to give you some sense that I have such a passion for lean, because I know it works. I know how important respect for people is. But the great thing about lean is that for managers that understand that, it shows the managers how to respect your people, how to do it in a productive way. Really practical tools. That's what's, to me, very exciting about lean management. So the way I approach it is, I start with lean thinking, the basic respect for people, continuous improvement. I've tried to translate that into a lean way of managing, and I'll talk about that. And then which leads to a lean culture, which is basically, these ways of thinking, respecting people, thinking of your employees as partners, not cogs in a wheel. And I know we talk about respect, but I really translate that in a practical sense to fully engaging your employees, which is kind of that. Sometimes we talk about the 8th waste, right, of not utilizing our talent. And
Yep.
So that's respect for people. And then continuous improvement, and I asked before in the breakout session, they're both very important. They really are. And to me, continuous improvement is kind of the way you can respect your people, because to pull that off, you have to respect your people. And the thinking is, think of work as processes and workspaces to be standardized and continually improved. So those ways of thinking, I work into when I teach and consult on lean, I really do it as kind of a lean development, almost like an org development project, where you're trying to not just teach technical tools, you're trying to teach a further advancement and progression of your organization. And so the core of that is this idea of the lean way of managing. And so what I found is a good way to teach this to managers, and I think maybe to anybody, is breaking it into 4 fundamental things that every organization involves. Every manager has to lead. Every organization has to work, right? We do work. Everybody solves problems. Everybody has to organize their workplace. So these are the lean ways of doing it. Be it respectfully engaging, working. That's where you bring in standard work as fundamental to the lean way of working. If you're not using standards and standard work approach, you're not doing the lean way of working. Solving problems, of course, that's where you bring in the notion of waste. And I really feel waste is kind of wasted. I mean, it's many times we talk about it, but it's not really operationalized. And you'll see one of the techniques I'll go over tonight is where I've had good success in really operationalizing it as a way of engaging employees. And then organizing, of course, very visual, the idea of visual controls and transparency. So to translate this into the front line, so why the front line? So front line is where, that's basically where I've lived my professional life. Even as the owner and president of a small mid-sized business, it's the front line. You're not high up in a hierarchy. You're not worried about a lot of different levels of management. This is a system that I try to teach for frontline managers to improve their frontline team. It could be a store. In a manufacturing setting, it's the shop floor teams. So it basically, as I said earlier, it applies to any any kind of industry, basically anything that is a process where you have a repetitive everyday kind of work. This absolutely will work. And I ended up being involved in supervising over 100 different projects in about every type of business in organization, nonprofits, governments that you can imagine. And so I know it works. So this idea of what lean tools are important. And this is where, I'm specifically not including manufacturing tools. So you don't see, Kanban, you don't see, and wow, did I do that? So these tools and techniques that you see here, I consider to be the most fundamental, the most essential to any operation. If you're in manufacturing, obviously there's a ton of stuff a ton of specific techniques and tools that make sense. I'm not trying to get in there. There's no way I'm sure you all know way more about that than I do. But nevertheless, what I'm covering here does apply to manufacturing operations, because this is kind of the rest of the picture. This is dealing with your people. Everybody's got to work. Everybody's got to solve problems. And, so these are the essential tools and techniques that that I teach to develop these kind of a frontline operating system. Now, the specific things I've kind of added and supplemented, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, I've highlighted here. So in leading, in addition to leader standard work and Gemba walks, I've developed a trust assessment method, a tool. And I'll talk about that last, actually. For working, standard work, stand-up meetings are normal. Process breakdown is what I've developed and used with a lot of success in teaching this to frontline managers. In terms of solving problems, you've got PDCA, there's all different problem solving, 8-step, 7-step, 4-step. And again, trying to make this work for managers on the front line, I've got the idea of lean circles, and which I'll cover. And in organizing, pretty traditional visual controls, 5S organizing. I do get into virtual workspaces that I've got some extra slides. If we have time tonight, we can get into that, but I didn't feel that might be as interesting to you. But certainly, as we're now into, work from home, obviously, web-based platforms and are a big part of work, and those can and should be organized just like physical workspaces. So, so that's something I could talk about if there's interest in it. Okay, so I'll stop for a second. Any questions or comments at this point? Shall we go forward? All right, I'll take that as a no. All right, so process breakdown. So this is the first of the 3 techniques I want to talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Hinds, we actually had a question in our chat.
Oh, okay.
Nicole is asking, how do you get them to buy in?
Yeah, that's a key point. And when I teach this to the managers, I emphasize their pain points, because having been there, I know their pain points. Their pain points are, always having to keep an eye on employees, dealing with pushback from employees, and then having to, obviously you're under the pressure to deliver results. And I really try to dig in and show them how this actually improves that. You get more buy-in. You actually get less stress. And one of the key areas I do that in is when I teach Gemba walks, because I start out really talking about micromanagement and kind of get them to connect. Yeah, I guess I do micromanage, but I've got to do it, right? And then talk about how it's a trap, how micromanaging it, now you're now you as the manager, you've got to be on top of everybody. It's a pain, and your people don't like it. You're taking away their ability to think and to contribute, and it's a vicious cycle. So anyway, basically, I do spend a lot of time doing kind of the within, what's in it for me, for managers, and also for employees. So, but that's a great question. I mean, it's in every part of this, I'm always thinking about how does this benefit you, the manager. The big thing lately, of course, the last few years is, are you keeping your employees? Are you able to hang on to your employees? And if you're not, let me show you a way of hanging on to them. So it's like try to find their pain point, show them how this this can help with that. Any other questions? Yeah, thanks for jumping in, Hillary. Just anybody that wants to jump in, please do. Okay, process breakdown. So let me get this going again. So this has to do with the working part. What is the lean way of working? And what I've done here is, in order to help management to describe and understand their processes, which normally you would say, well, we should do some value stream mapping, right? I mean, absolutely. And value stream mapping is a terrific way of doing it. But value stream mapping is, I found, to be a lot to handle for a frontline manager. I mean, realizing frontline managers are, they're really, it's like having been a small business owner. You don't have a whole lot of time. You're really, putting out fires all the time. So I tried to come up with something that's not as involved, not as technical, doesn't take as much time, and really is the basis for creating standard work. So the idea of a process breakdown sheet, when they're first learning about the lean way of working, of course, it's based on standardizing. But what do we standardize? Well, the way I teach it is to start with one of your core processes, and I'll give you some examples in here. And I'm sure you all recognize this from the job breakdown sheet from TWI, where you have, you break it into important steps. I've added in process actors. Then you get the key points that will make or break the process, make the work easier or injure the worker. So to get them to fill this out, they have to identify, okay, what is this process? Where does it start? Where does it end? Who are the process customers? Super important for them to get that idea of even thinking about what does that even mean? What are the outputs, and who are the actors? Who actually carries out the steps? And the way I do it, I say, look, no more than 15 steps. I'd like you to shoot for 5 to 7 steps. And of course, there's a skill in that of being able to think of your process in these kind of bigger chunks. But it's critical because I feel you've got to start at that high level, and then you can build down from there. Then you can explode it out into detail. So when I teach this, hopefully this thing will work. It's always kind of fun to look at the pit stop example. I'm going to go ahead and this is just a 2-minute video. We'll take a look at it, and then I'll show you how the pit stop process fits into that process breakdown sheet, just so you see an example of how this works. But let me go ahead and play this, and if you can't hear it, let me know. Sometimes we have to mess with it, but. Here.
I'm not hearing it. Dr. Hines, we've had a couple people say that there's no audio, and I'm actually not hearing anything either.
See if I can get off of this now. Oops, sorry, let me try. I'm sorry, let me try to get. How do I get off of this? Oh, goodness.
I think you'll have to unshare, and then when you reshare,
Is that it?
click on
Okay.
share audio, optimize the video.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. Let me do it one more time.
The sound icon had a slash through it.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't.
But I agree. I don't think we needed any
Yeah.
sound. It's about the speed.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't. You couldn't hear it.
No, there was no audio.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, yeah, you could get the gist of it without. Okay, I've got it. Let me get back here now. Okay. All right, we're back. Oh no, stay off of there. Yeah, so all right, sorry for not having that on, but yeah, the key thing is observing that. Of course, it's kind of fun to see the difference between the two, and we can talk about, process improvement from over the years. But the real purpose of this was to, observe that early pit stop process, and let's see how you fill out a process breakdown sheet. So you basically can describe that process in 7 steps: drive car into pit, jack up front of car, change front tires, and so forth. Who are the actors, whether there's a driver, specific crew members, and then the key points. So for example, position car in center of marked area. So if you look at, there was a marked area here, that would be something that either could make the work easier, like if you don't position it there, or maybe make or break the process. Maybe they can't get the tire on if it's not in the middle or whatever. Hold car up until both tires are changed and so forth. So anyway, what this does is it gets them to think through and kind of put an area of activity, of work activity, into the form of a process, practice how to get it into steps, and then begin to think about kind of quality influencers, things that can make or break it, make work easier, and so forth. Having done that, then I advocate taking this and making what I call a standard work guide out of it. So here's an example. So taking those 7 steps, you can then make something that could be posted so all the employees can see it. Becomes a visual control. And there's many forms. Obviously, sometimes they involve visual, sometimes they don't. This is just an example of how a standard work guide could be created from that. But so basically, the process breakdown sheet lets you understand and document the process, think a little bit about improvement areas, and then create a standard work guide that everybody can see. And the way I view that is, this should not just be for the people in the pit. This should be for everybody working in this organization, and it should be understandable to them, so it helps in coordination. So I always want the standard work guide to be something at a higher level, avoid acronyms, things like that. Here's an example from a few months ago in a social service agency. breaking out how a certain enrollment process. So again, as few steps as possible. Who are the actors? What are key points? Here's another version of it, actually just from yesterday on it's a political operation. And here can give you an example. You see, this is this high level, 5 steps only. In this form, this is what everybody in the organization would understand and be asked to understand. This is how you create voter lists when you're going to go out and do canvassing, text or phone. But then you can drill that down into a detail that says, okay, here's the detail steps, here are the key points, but each one of these rolls back up. So for example, generating the draft list, that was just here, it's just one line. Your output is a draft saved list. The actor is the data team. But then here is more the instructions for the people that actually do the work. So I found it really helps to kind of organize, the idea is you go through and you start one by one, taking the core processes of the organization and getting them into this form. And sometimes you're creating it new from scratch. Sometimes you're taking existing standard operating procedures and converting to this form. So that's it. Just one, give you one idea there. So let me open it up. Questions. Anybody do something like this maybe already? I mean, I know, like I say, the job breakdown sheet from training within industry uses a similar form, but I don't think has been used kind of for the whole process and to be a basis for standard work. But look for your comments on that.
Hey, David, it's Nicole.
Yeah, hi, Nicole.
Hey, I have a burning comment, especially when you talked about value stream mapping being a little bit more challenging for a frontline manager. But I'm curious your thoughts of which comes first, value stream mapping or process detail sheet? Because what I'm thinking is that if we detail a process like this, but the process is unnecessary or provides no value for the output of the consumer or the staff member, whoever it is, then we are working on a process that really is just because it's part of what we do, as opposed to should we get rid of this because it serves no value. So just wanted to see which you think comes first.
Comes first, whether you do this first or value stream mapping first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I definitely feel this would come first. Because it's the first, it would be actually the first step in creating a value stream map. I've taught value stream mapping for years in the MBA program, and that's how I would do it is, first starting with the steps, understanding it, and then putting it into a value stream map form, and then looking for the waste areas and so forth. So this is, like I say, to me, this is like a starter to that. And then for the frontline management that does want to take it to the next step of value stream mapping, you're already, half or more of the way there. But your comment about should we, if I understand right, kind of why are we taking all our time doing this when maybe this isn't even a value added process, right? Maybe we should get rid of it. And it's a good point. I mean, the way that gets handled is I'm always starting this with your core processes. So it's not something that would even be debatable. It would be, for example, with that, I just showed you in that social service agency, enrolling clients in their program. I mean, that's core. You've got to do it. Now, are there parts of it that are wasteful? Absolutely could be. But you really have to, like with a value stream map, you have to first map it in order to then begin envisioning the waste points and identifying the waste points. And this is just, I view it as a simpler way of finding those waste points. And maybe when you do this, you say, okay, yeah, there's a lot of waste here. We can really cut this back. So.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah,
I think until a process is standardized, it cannot be improved, and the employees really have to respect the work breakdown sheet and follow it exactly, so that when it is changed, they'll follow that new change.
yeah, great point. Right, right. Yeah, you can't. Who was it that said if you can't have come with no? I'm sorry, I'm mixing Deming's comment about process, but yeah, absolutely. You got to have a starting point. So even if it's a very wasteful process, if it is how you do it, well, let's get on paper. This is how we do it, and let's all do this, but systematically improve it. So as we make improvements, then everybody can get on board with the new improvement. The thing that makes this, of course, so important for the respect for people side is that you're not just saying, hey, you must follow this. At the same, out of the other side of your mouth, you're saying, hey, can you improve this? I mean, that's the great thing. So this is what you take into the stand-up meetings and say, look, this is how we're doing it, but this is not locked in concrete. This is an invitation for you, the employees, to improve this. And they can't, just like you say, that you can't improve a process you haven't standardized. They can't suggest improvements if they don't really understand the process. So good comments. Thank you.
And then we had another question in the chat. Got tongue-tied there for a minute. Where does the 100 years technology advancement fit in? And can we just attribute the efficiency all to process improvement?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the context. What do you mean the 100 years?
Rajiv, do you want to?
Yeah, maybe give me a little. Not sure.
Yeah. So
explain.
So we have two the pit stops. I think it's 100 years or 50 years. There's a difference in of time of 100 years or less than 50 years. I don't remember what was the first one.
Right.
But there has been some tremendous advancement in technology, right? So we cannot attribute everything to process improvement in all the efficiency gains. It cannot be just attributed to process improvement. So what I would have liked, I mean, I'm not telling you what to do, but what I would have liked is something in both 2013 pit stop where one process is different than the other. So we don't have that discrepancy in terms of time, right?
Yeah, good point. And I've been hit with that before too. So you're not the first one, Richie. Yeah, I mean, really, the real point is I could just show the earlier one and say, because that is a good short video of a process, because I'm also trying to teach them how to observe a process and put it into steps. So really the core of that lesson is that first part and how it gets put into the process breakdown sheet. And maybe I should just stop it there, but I don't know. I just find it's so fun to just see how much it's advanced. But when I do talk about it as process improvement, you're absolutely right. I mean, well, first of all, you went from 3 crew members to about, I don't know, 20, and then added who knows what technology there. So you're absolutely right. You can't equate the two. You can't say that's process improvement. You're right. So you got me. I agree with you. Other thoughts, questions? All right, and we'll hopefully have a little time at the end, because I'm going to do mainly focus on this one other technique, and then briefly talk about the trust tool, and then we can get into these. Anything else you want to talk about on this? So that's the lean way of working. Now the lean way of solving problems. What I find there is, we have a ton of lean methodology for doing that, 8-step, 7-step methods. We have, waste, 7 wastes, 8 wastes, Kaizen events, improvement events. And, but again, when you're looking in the context of a frontline operation, small, store, a retail store, having the time to kind of step back and do that, often you just don't have it. And so what I've tried to do here is come up with something that's very practical on the front lines and also gets the workers, the employees more involved in it, more engaged in it, and engaged not just in solving problems, but also finding problems. So I think, sometimes organizations, the management is left to be the ones finding the problems and saying, okay, here's the problem, guys, can you solve it? Which is great, but even better, in my opinion, is employees being able to help find problems. So that's what Lean Circles is meant to do. So I'll show what Lean Circles are. They're built on the idea of waste. And I know it may be heretical. Is that a right word? Heretical. But what I found is what works best for everyday employees and frontline managers, there's 4 basic kinds of waste. And they're defects, weighting, effort, and materials. And just, is my claim that these 4 absolutely pick up everything in the normal 7, the Tim Wood we often see. And here's how they map. I mean, defects are defects and weighting is weighting. But when you get into effort is transportation, motion, obviously, walking and so forth, hand motions, and then over processing. All of that is just more effort than's needed. Materials involves overproduction or inventory. So let me show you how I define these, and again in a very simple way that everybody can kind of relate to and internalize, as opposed to, Tim Wood is great, and in manufacturing, that's where you do, this is sort of manufacturing oriented too. So I'm not advocating getting rid of this. I'm just saying the way I teach it in this more generalized environment, these 4 work perfectly fine. But so I try to teach it in a way that you can internalize it, you can easily remember it. And so here's the 4. So waste being any activity that doesn't produce value for the customer. So always getting back to that process customer. Defects, errors, mistakes, or problems with a product or service. But to identify a problem or an error, you have to know who is the customer. Is it a problem for the customer? And then waiting longer than necessary to serve that customer. Effort, exerting more effort than needed to serve the customer. Materials, acquiring, holding, or using more material than needed to serve the customer. So you see you're picking up where you get into overproduction, which, in a non-manufacturing environment, overproduction can be over procurement, purchasing issues. Holding picks up the inventory side, and then using can, picks up scrap and, using too much of a particular material. So anyway, these are the 4. These are the ways I teach waste, and I'll show you how that then fits into the Lean Circle. So again, I'm trying to make something that every employee can understand, knows these 4, and knows what I call the waste signals. So here's the 4. And this is the common waste signals, and this is, hopefully showing the employees, giving them some guidance on how to find the problems, and I find that waste is such an important and useful lens for looking at problems, and you'll see how that fits into the Lean Circle in just a second. So for example, defects. If you realize you're reworking something, that's a defect. If I had to rework it, there must have been something wrong. But also promise to the customer not kept. So for example, if a steak is overcooked, if the customer complains, then you have to rework it, right? You have to pick it up, redo the steak and so forth. But that steak might be overcooked, the customer didn't complain, but that's still a defect, because our promise to the customer to come up with a steak that they to their specifications was not kept. So, so those are the common signals, you know, waiting, customer upset with delays, waiting in line, effort, people walking in back and forth. You know, I mean, some of these are not, you know, a lot of this is subjective. I mean, there is a lot of intuition in here, but that's what a lot of improvement can come from, is the intuition of the people in the front lines going, why am I walking back and forth so much? Let me think about that. Oh, that's too much effort. Now, where do I go with that? And I'll show you where they go with it. Dust on storage boxes and materials, whatever. So, and this can be customized, by the way. These are generic waste signals, but depending on the organization, these can be customized to the specific organization. Okay, so here's how it fits together. Here's the lean circle. You know, nothing unusual about it other than, you know, you kind of, I mean, basically find the problem. This is triggered by the waste signal and a metric that's tied to the waste signal. Speculate on possible causes, you know, that can be your 5 whys if you want to get that far, or just talk about why could this be happening? Brainstorm and try out possible solutions, whether you try them physically or you just, you know, thought experiments, and then choose and standardize a solution. So here's, you know, an example of, you know, the restaurant patron where rework was required because we were getting a lot of complaints about steaks being overcooked. So that's the observed signal. The key thing is it then gets you to define a type of waste as a defect and get a measure of that waste. And this becomes your success measure for, are we improving, you know, based on whatever countermeasure we might take here. Possible causes could be temperature. You know, I won't go through these in detail. You can always look at them afterwards. But so one of the key things is, though, using this one of the 4 wastes as a waste type, you identify a measure and then you track it. And as I'm sure you know, a lot of these process metrics, you know, they're not in your systems. So you often have to set up a hand tracking that you may not do forever. You may only do while you're, you know, evaluating this new way of doing things, but it's a success metric. It says, are we getting better? And, you know, this was a time issue here, again, support ticket handling times and so forth. So so that's the idea of a lean circle. Again, I found it works well with getting employees more involved in actually finding and solving problems. Sometimes it's not, there's kind of 2 versions. One is an employee sees a signal and says, hey, we need to get together. And that's when you sit down and the employee can walk through this on their own. Maybe somebody that understands this process, they can kind of, you know, brainstorm on their own. But, you know, best you get at least a few people that are involved that can form a circle. And I know that, you know, quality circles are certainly part of TQM and other kinds of methodologies. But you can also have this kind of eureka moment. And this is a real situation here from one of our, you know, our great partner, City Furniture. I can talk at the end about it a little bit. But very large furniture retailer. And one of the workers just, you know, they deliver the furniture in boxes. And when they get, the furniture has to come back and get touched up in the repair shop. When they ship it out again, they go get another box and rebox it themselves, you know. And the guy on the floor said, why don't we just use moving blankets instead of the cardboard box? It was sort of like why don't we do this? You know, it's like a eureka moment. And so you still go through, you know, what are the waste types? What should you be measuring? But here the cause is, well, we've never done it that way. Nobody thought about it. But you still have to check it out. You know, how does it work? Did you have to do anything differently to make it work? And you standardize it. So anyway, so these circles, 4 wastes. I'm a heretic, I know. Go ahead, beat me up.
Hey, David, we had a question and a comment in the chat. First comment was, you can use spaghetti diagrams for assessing effort and weighting. And the question in regard to that was, what is a good program to draw a spaghetti diagram? They tried a particular program, but they're wondering if something else is better. I think Viso is what they mentioned.
Visio, yeah.
Visio, okay.
Visio's pretty good, yeah. Spaghetti diagrams, I haven't found anything good. I do a lot just on PowerPoint. I mean, PowerPoint can be really powerful.
Mhm.
But yeah, you're right. Spaghetti diagrams definitely get into the effort. One of the examples I used came from McKinsey, where they do a spaghetti diagram of before and after on preparing breakfast sandwiches, and they go from like 14 movements to about 5 movements. So yeah, that's a good way to present it.
Hmm.
I mean, does anybody do you all feel you're using? We talk about waste, but it seems like it's not operationalized. You know, we don't even a lot of process improvement. They'll talk about the waste, but then they go off and say, but now let's try to improve something. I don't know. Maybe it's just my bias. What do you all think of the 4 wastes? I'm always trying to simplify, and I don't want to simplify away important stuff. But and again, I recognize in manufacturing that you may need all 7 ways to as a tool, but
I think the 4 wastes are an easy way to remember all 7 of them. Like, I think they're good mental triggers to remember all 7.
yeah, if anything, you just say, well, I've got the 4, and then you just have to remember, well, effort could be transport, motion, or over processing, so.
Right. Yep, exactly.
Anyway.
Okay. We had another question in the chat. Is there any effort to gain respect for the members of a circle by doing an instrument such as the Bilbin, and then get the team to understand how the others on team are thinking, their process?
I'm not familiar. What is the Bilbin?
A fellow by the name of Meredith Bilbin back in the late 70s in the UK noticed that you had some really bright people, mostly PhDs, on teams to solve serious problems. And as bright as they were, they didn't work very well together. And one of the reasons they didn't work very well together is they didn't understand how each other were thinking. And as a consequence, he came up with an instrument called the Bilbin instrument, and everybody here can take it if they want to spare $65. But it's a very, very interesting instrument because it talks to you about 9 different ways that you look at the world and how you interact with the world in a team environment. This is not the same thing as Myers-Briggs, okay? It's not the same thing as DISC. This is the Bilbin. How does one work in a team environment? How do you work with other people who have, and it is a team. We're not talking about groups here. We all know team is a group that has a given target they're supposed to be working towards, right?
Right.
But given that everybody buys into, we're working towards this target or this goal, just about every time I've worked with teams, there are some people who are sort of shy, you could say. They back off. They're not full participants, even when their toes get stepped on. You've got others that are very easy to basically take over. And 90% of the ideas that are expressed come from just 1 or 2 people out of a 5 or 6 or 7 person team. And the Bilbin, once everybody's taken the Bilbin and understands the ramifications of it, really puts the kibosh on that sort of nonsense and gets everybody to be a much more fully contributing team member.
That's awesome.
There was an excellent article written by a guy by the name of Bill Zeeb, last name Zeeb. It was like 3-4 months ago on LinkedIn. Just put in Bill Zeeb and the Bilbin, Excellent explanation on the Bilbin.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it sounds like a good, interesting. I've heard of, I don't know if it's similar. There's is it the 7 hats, or there's a technique where,
Yeah, the seven hats doesn't hold a
No.
candle to Bilbin's 9.
Okay. Okay.
It might be an interesting thing for senior executives to capture their attention, but where you really want to go to get real results that give you the ability for people to begin to understand other people and how they're thinking. And just because they came up with this thing, it's not automatically a harebrained idea. That guy is thinking different than that gal over there, and we need to accept that. And we want to leverage these people. We don't want to put them down.
Yeah.
So we need to understand how the other person is thinking, so we can maximize the thinking power, the brain power, the solutions power, if you will, of this team. And the Bilbin does an excellent job of that, and it has a heck of a history. I mean, 1977, 78, something like that. It's been going on for a while.
Yeah. Great. No, that could be useful in teaching too. I know in teaching MBA, you always have that issue of, the few students that are going to spout up all the time. And, you're always trying to get everybody involved, and everybody's got a different way of thinking and processing and learning and all that. So, all right, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hillary, how are we doing on time? I've got one more, but I can go through it quickly, or
We probably have about 10 minutes left.
perfect. Okay. All
Now,
right.
let's go for the last one. I'm real interested in that one.
Oh, trust assessment.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So trust assessment. I've developed, well, here for really, it has two purposes in what I do. One is assessing the cultural health of an organization, and this is based on the work of I'll refer here. Here's my actual tool that I've developed and really successful. Based on the work of Stephen M.R. Covey, who's, in my opinion, done the best work on really defining trust and showing just how central and important it is to organizational performance. And so Covey had identified 7 levels of trust in an organization. I've put it into 4 dimensions and a scoring system where you can basically get a sense for how your organization fares in this, how trusting you are or not. So kind of at a high level, you can have a respectful organization. Even better is a trusting, even better is caring. And, that breaks out into a lot of different measures when you look at the assessment form. But on the downside, once you kind of go to the dark side, you get disrespectful, from there worse to abusive, and then even to toxic. And, these do exist. All of these exist. From a lean standpoint, I've used this as kind of the break point of, if you're at or close to level 5 or above, you're really ready for lean development. You're ready to really take on the continuous improvement methods that I've talked about here, the process breakdowns, all that. If you're below it, you have to be cautious, because using, the respect for people approach to lean will create trust. It will build trust, but it also requires trust. It's like a chicken and egg. And so if you're in a fairly low trust environment to start, and you come in starting to ask people to, employees to, expose, I think we talked about it earlier, Chuck, being willing to talk about all their workarounds, and, and if anything, you start talking, you start asking them questions, they're going to view it as an inquisition. So it can actually turn south on you. So I view it as a readiness measure, where you stand here, but more broadly, just as a management consultant and trainer, I really emphasize and in fact, I say that I feel that one of, or maybe the primary goal of a manager or a leader is to build organizational trust. I don't think there's anything more important, and everything else is secondary to that. So, and Covey shows basically from the top to bottom, there's about a 7 or 8-fold difference in performance. I mean, if you go from baseline, say level 5 to level 7, you'll typically see a 40% gain in performance. And then on the downside, going down, you can get up to an 80% loss in performance. And his books really explain that in a lot of detail, give a lot of examples. But when you start thinking about it, you know, lack of trust is so distracting. It requires so much additional cost and so forth. So anyway, this is the basic tool. I don't know if you have, I've used it pretty extensively. It's got to be used carefully. You don't want to use it to identify somebody. It's best done anonymously with a third party. I don't want to, that's kind of the basics of it. It's all available to, by the way, any of this is available for anybody, and none of this is proprietary that I'm showing you. I'm, you know, would love anybody who wants to use this. I've got my contacts at the end, but any thoughts about this, questions? Most of the time I get, you know, some people will of course say, some employees will say, oh, we're at level 7. Yeah, there's a great level of engagement and all. And usually these are people that just are saying what they think you want to hear. That's why you got to be careful how you administer this. But most of the time you're in level 6, 5, 4, 3, sometimes 2. And then you get the disgruntled people that say, yeah, everything's a 1. Yeah, everything's toxic around here. So it's really a very interesting. You get a lot of, it's not just getting an overall score of where do you stand as an organization, but you can also dig in and see whether it's, you know, something, for example, like I've got one organization that was quite high in policies and procedures. They did a really good job of documenting them, but personal relationships, working atmosphere were quite a bit lower. So, you know, it not only gives you kind of a general sense of where you stand as an organization, but it can also help you to drill down and see areas you might want to improve in. And then, of course, when I start with a client, I always start with this as a baseline, and then you do it again, you know, 6 months from now, a year from now. So you can also track your progress, because I represent this as a really fundamental success measure for your whole lean development program. How are you doing? You know, if it's not raising the level of trust in your organization, there's something wrong. You can look at all the performance, you know, outcomes and all of that, but you know, it's hard to get at these kind of measures, and I found this to be pretty useful.
Yeah.
It looks like a great base. So do you, when you get the numbers back from the individuals, do you look at the distributions? Do you ever come up with a bimodal distribution where you got a chunk of the organization saying you're at 5 and 6, and you got another chunk that say you're at the level 2, or you got an outlier, or maybe 2 outliers, maybe out of 20 people, you got 2 people that are down at level 2, and the rest of them, the other 18, are up at level 6.
Yeah.
Do you want, is part of your analysis to look at those distributions?
It is, but you know, I'm always very cautious about that, because you know, the tool can be used to single somebody out and say, you know, gee, why are you so disgruntled? You know, especially if it's a
Small organization.
small organization where it's hard to keep it anonymous. So
Yeah.
I've had situations like that. It's like, you know, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's really interesting, and you know, realize we're asking them to, individuals, to rate how they think the whole organization is. It's not like personal relationships. It's not, what are your personal relationships? It's how is the organization? How are relationships in general? And, you know, sometimes that's hard to, they're still going to think of their own personal relationships. But one of the things I found interesting is, you know, you give this to the high level managers and then you give it to everybody else. And it's sort of got that, let's see, you know, if the, oftentimes there it's revealing to the higher level folks of like, ooh, gee, I thought things were going well here. Maybe they're not, you know, so it's that certainly can happen.
We did have one individual in the chat talk about what he feels his company is at, and he said his lab is level 4, but among areas it is 1 to 2. He says, okay. So yeah. And then someone else said they think this is an excellent tool, as do I. So
yeah, excellent. Listen, anybody, I'm happy to send this out, and I've actually, you know, a number of times done the analysis. If you give me, I've got a summary table, you give it back to me, I can give you some feedback on that.
Okay.
So.
Yep. Oh, and then we did have just one more comment come in. It said, this person said the redundancy or bureaucracy of policies and procedures can be dependent on the type of industry. For example, more redundancy or bureaucracy is typically needed in aerospace to ensure the safety of products.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I understand that. Right. Yeah, so it's you have to relate it. You don't necessarily compare this from one industry to the other. It's more for, you know, for within your organization. So
yeah.
All right, good comments. Thank you. All right, well, so you know, here's my contact information, and feel free to email me. This is my book. It's available on Amazon. It's a easy read. It's been really successful. I've used it as the textbook in the MBA, and a couple of different MBA courses have used it. Some of the free materials available, City Furniture, which I mentioned briefly, they're just an unbelievably good example of how this approach can work it's a material industry being a retailer, but it's a service industry for sure. And this is a 1-hour video with Andrew Koenig, who is the one that really brought this in. It's a family business, but they're up to, I don't know, $400 or $500 million bucks. And a lot of my book and my experiences have been based on using them as a lab and seeing. I basically lived through their journey, which started about 12 years ago. So they have their own operating system and so forth. But that's and I often take people there to visit, and it's a really great experience. So that's a 1-hour video explaining it. And then the other thing is this is a series of 4 webinars, basically. Well, these were executive education sessions that I offered, and then recorded them and put them in a form of a book, and they're available here for free as well on YouTube. So so I don't know if they can access that, Hillary. If you want to put those, I guess we could put them in the chat or send them out after the links for those.
Yeah, we can send them out after. Or let me see. I'll put them in the chat now. Let's see if you give me just a minute.
I could probably do it too, actually.
EBFLX.
Oh, sorry, I should.
Whoops.
All right.
So is it for the City Furniture operating system? Is there an extra period in YouTube?
Yeah, it's YouTube. You know, I can probably get off here. I can just copy paste it in myself if you're going to do some wrap up. Why don't
okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
I hate for you to have to do that. And
okay.
I did put some extra slides in. So they're in there, I guess, if you're sending this to everybody, about virtual workspaces and so forth. But I know we're kind of past the time. So
okay. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and get off of there, and I'll put it in the chat. And then if you want to, any final questions, of course, I'm love to hear however you want to wrap it up, Hillary.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any final questions for Dr. Hinds before we move on to last minute announcements? Oh, maybe. Let me see. We just have. Okay. Very interesting presentation, especially the trust document. Great presentation, lots of food for thought. Thank you. Bunch of thank yous.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for the interesting presentation, Dr. Hinds. I will definitely be using much of that information in my own career. So it's very beneficial for sure.
Thank you.
I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Okay. Just a few final announcements before we disband for the evening. Just a reminder to complete the event satisfaction survey that you will be receiving in your email. The event satisfaction survey will be coming from our new VOC chair, Chuck Cox, this month. So be on the lookout for an email from peaklean6sigma@gmail.com. And he's just a reminder, he's also the person that you will be emailing if you happen to watch any of the recordings on the Phoenix section website. If you want those RU certificates, this is who you will email. Our 2024 program schedule, we're striving to provide 12 hybrid meetings, 3 per quarter with a guest speaker. We might have some of those in person, but at least for this first part of the year, they're going to be all virtual. We'd like to offer at least one tour of a company, a winery or brewery. This would be in person only. Last year we did Sandhand Gardens Brewery and had a great time. We're looking at a winery or something similar this year. And then we're also looking to provide one community outreach event. This past year we participated at Feed My Starving Children. We've been looking at Habitat for Humanity or similar organizations. And again, this one would be in person only. And then coming up February 8th, 2024, next month's program meeting, we will have a presentation on unlocking the next generation of customer experience by Karen Wu. And just as a reminder, you can find us on various social media platforms, including Facebook, LinkedIn, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can use these social media sites to find out what is happening, what the current most up-to-date information is for our section, what the most current up-to-date events, those types of things. And before we sign off for the evening, are there any final thoughts, comments, or questions for this evening? All right, well, I'm going to take the silence as a no. Actually, I'll check the chat really quick. Oh, thank you for the kind words, everybody. That's very sweet. Okay, no final questions. So thank you all for attending this evening. It is appreciated. We hope you got something out of this presentation. And until we see you next month, please stay safe and stay healthy. And we'll see you again soon.
1875 St. Mary. I need that package, Lou. The one Joe McCusick sent you. I know you didn't get rid of it. It's not your style, not the Louis Carnacki, I know. Word of advice, Roy, just let this one pass you by. Did you know Lila Addison was murdered by her brother? First rule of being a lawyer is never ask a question you don't want an answer to. This is good, not a lawyer. Yeah, well, that's the problem with you cops. You live on the corner of black and white, but over